Well, President Obama adopting a suggestion from his friend, billionaire Warren Buffett. This morning, Obama is scheduled to unveil a new tax on Americans making more than $1 million to help cut the nation's debt. Well, joining us now from Washington is former Deputy Treasury Secretary Stuart Eizenstat. He's currently a partner at Covington and Burling. And Stu, I want to get your take on this proposed tax. I mean, I know you found President Obama's jobs bill to be credible. Is this a credible proposal?
Well, it's not going to pass Congress, but what the president was trying to do is thread a political needle. On the one hand, this tax has to be put into the context of a challenge to the special congressional committee to actually double the amount of deficit reduction they're mandated to do, a full $3 trillion.
Right.
If you add that to the trillion that's already been done, this is the full Simpson-Bowles proposal. But, Betty, by having 50% in taxes, including the millionaire tax, and only 50% in spending, it's imbalanced. It's too light on entitlements and too heavy on taxes. Now, politically, it will strengthen his base, and so that's the needle he's tried to thread. Show that he's serious about deficit reduction, but do so in ways that reinforce the Democratic base. I think publicly this will be popular. The actual millionaires part raises a very small amount of money because there are not many people in that category.
And I think this is the president's fourth attempt, or at least the third or the fourth attempt, to try to put some sort of proposal ahead of a committee to cut the deficit. I mean, how do we know that this is going to be anything different, that this salvo is going to create anything in terms of breaking the impasse here in Congress?
What this will do is not break the impasse. This will be a document the president can go to the public in 2012. I think what's likely to happen now, given the $447 billion that also has to be paid for on top of the mandate that the special committee has, Betty, is that we're likely to face a sequester. I think that the special committee will be able to do some of the deficit reduction, but not as much as required for the $1.2 trillion that it was already mandated to do, plus pay for the president's jobs tax, jobs bill. So I think we're in for a partial sequester across the board of defense and domestic spending.
But I mean, in your view, though, Stu, I mean, any type of deficit reduction that comes out from this super committee is then, in your view, going to have to involve some sort of revenue increase, some sort of tax increase then?
It will, because the president said that he won't sign any deficit reduction plan that doesn't have some revenues, but that gives him flexibility. For example, there's broad bipartisan support. 74 senators supported ending ethanol tax subsidies.
Okay.
So there are pieces like that that could be accepted, but the millionaire's tax certainly will not get anywhere with Republicans.
Stu, let me turn to Treasury Secretary Geithner's trip to Europe and the somewhat cold reception he got from some of the finance ministers. Do you think it was a good idea that he had gone to Europe to do this?
This is his second trip in 2 weeks. Tim and I worked together in the Clinton Treasury Department, and I have a great deal of confidence in him. I think he had to go. Now, the fact is that the advice he gave, which is to have a massive European financial stability fund, perhaps as much as $1 trillion, to reassure the markets that both the sovereign governments and the debt that the banks hold in those sovereigns will be taken care of, and that the European Central Bank has enough money and the fund has. The problem is that it got a chilly reception because they look at our economic performance, our debt limit debate, and they say, you know, you don't have, as we say in the law, clean hands. You've got your own problems.
Is what they're saying.
And so who are you to give advice? The fact is, Tim's advice is the right advice, and Europe has to come to a very simple conclusion. If they want to keep the euro, which is absolutely essential that they do, they have to, in fact, create this fund. They have to implement what they passed in July, but has still not passed all 17 parliaments. And then they have to increase that $660 billion, I think up to $1 trillion, to say to the markets, we've got enough to capitalize the banks which are holding the sovereign debt and to deal with any potential defaults. That is essential. So Tim's advice there is right. But coming from the U.S., it's been unfortunately dismissed. They can dismiss it, but if they don't do it, then we're all in trouble because our economies are so tightly integrated on the transatlantic marketplace.
So in your view, it's the right message, but perhaps the wrong messenger in the view of the Europeans. Stu, thank you very much. I always appreciate you joining us, Stu Eizenstat.